If the majority of your congregation lives 20 miles or more away from your church building, you may be leading a church that is out of touch with its community. This is a unique kind of stuck church because people are driving in from somewhere to the building to be the church, but they don't know anybody in the neighborhood around them. The reason this often happens is because this church is several generations old, and these are the children or the children of the original founders of the church. And as time has gone by, they've moved further and further away from the church building, but they still consider the church their church. And so they drive in, they love this church, they consider that they have a heritage here, they've been married here, they've done a lot of things in this church building, been part of the youth group sometime in the past, but they don't know anybody in the neighborhood around the church building, and the church has no ministry to that neighborhood that it's in. What ends up happening is that the church has no way to sow the gospel in the community around it. And you're really frustrated because you see people out there in the neighborhood that could be reached by the church, but you have no task force, no group of people who are joining with you in this effort because they live too far away. They're not really there to help you. They're there to be your audience. And that's the problem that you're really struggling with an out-of-touch church. One pastor of an out-of-touch church had a huge diverse neighborhood right across the street from the church building, but nobody in that diverse neighborhood crossed the street to come to church. And he thought that this was the church's mission field. So he began to strategically recruit people in his church to help him to think about how they could reach that neighborhood for Christ. And as they looked at that neighborhood, they realized that there was a school in that neighborhood that if they could find ways of ministering to the children and the teachers of that school, they could make inroads in sowing the gospel in this community. What was important is that he did not see the people in his congregation as the enemy. He didn't blame them for what had happened. He didn't try to guilt them into helping him. He recruited willing people, and they went in and they began to honor the teachers and bring backpacks to kids who didn't have any school supplies, and meals for weekends for kids who weren't going to have food for the weekend. And they began to let the school do special events at the church building. Now, this was not necessarily sowing the gospel, but what it did is it broke down walls between the community and the church building so that people felt comfortable on the grounds, and people began to cross the street and come to the church, and their kids would come to the church, and people began to get saved. And the church began to become a neighborhood church as well as a church that served people that came from out of the area. If you're the pastor of an out-of-touch church, how do you address this? Like my friend, this other pastor, you don't want to look upon your people as the enemy. You want to lead them to internal transformation within their lives so that they begin to yearn for the gospel, that they care about what God cares about. And as you preach and teach, you've got to lift their eyes up and see around them a new strategy, a new mission field that God has placed them in. And you want to work with those who are ready to work with you as your first step in bringing change in this out-of-touch church. Secondly, you want to pick your harvest field. Maybe it's not a school, maybe it's a playground, or maybe you need to establish a program within your church building to reach into the neighborhood that will bring benefits, things like divorce care or parenting skills or computer skills, anything that would get people to cross through your threshold into your building that takes away the fear that this is not a safe place. And so you want to choose your mission field carefully. The third thing is to pick your battles carefully, because whenever you begin to bring change in the church, there's a feeling of discomfort and conflict can arise. And so you don't want to just throw this in the face of people or tell them to just get with it or put them down. You want to assure them that what you're doing is going to bring health to the church and allow them to join you as they are ready. Momentum is your best ally with this group. When they see God doing things through the congregation again, through the church again, the Spirit can shift their hearts and they can become excited about what is possible today. So often, an out of touch group of people are still nostalgic about what God was doing when their parents and grandparents were alive. And they've never been able to see God work through them. When the dynamic of God working through you and the congregation begins to see people crossing the line of faith and new disciples being made, their hearts change and they get excited and they become a congregation again who is moving forward with the gospel and impacting the community. On the next video, I want to talk about the burnt out church.